Well, it is 7:15. Thank you everybody for joining the Norton Planning Board's meeting of April the 6th of 2021. I'm just going to start the meeting today with a quick introduction discussing the kind of ground rules for this virtual session. Since we are now more than a year into all of this, it's a little bit repetitive, but we're going to do it anyway. We're all in this together. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Norton Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation for members of the public and or parties with a right or requirement to attend can be found on the Town of Norton's website, that is nortonma.org. To participate in the meeting, you may do so in the following ways. To join online via video, you can use the link posted in the agenda for the meeting, or if you're using the Zoom video app, you can use meeting ID 638-929-1060. There's also a dial-in number posted on the agenda should you so choose. The meeting is also being streamed on Norton Cable Access, Channel 15. It'll be available on the Norton Media Center's YouTube page tomorrow. No in-person attendance for members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In addition, please feel free to email questions to the board ahead of the meeting or during the meeting to Paul DiGiuseppe, the town planner, whose email address is on the agenda and listed on the town's website. Additionally, meeting materials are available on the Town of Norton's website under the Planning Board page. Again, every effort is being made to ensure the public can access these proceedings in real time. In the event we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we'll post on the town's website an audio, video recording, transcript, or other record of the proceedings as soon as possible. And my own personal aside, while we are on a Zoom meeting and while there is a chat function, please do not use the chat function to make personal comments of any kind regarding members of the board or other participants in the meeting. While they are not necessarily part of the public record for the meeting, if they are relevant enough to be introduced, they may be recorded as part of these meeting minutes. So, with all that out of the way, thank you everybody for joining. With 55 people on the meeting tonight, so I'm going to try and keep us moving. So everybody who would like to participate has the opportunity to do so. To start the meeting with our general business in terms of planning board business and policies, Paul, I think we'll cover meeting times at the end, just so we can get through everybody on all the agenda items on the call, if that makes sense to you.
Perfect.
Bills and warrants, there are none posted in the folder. We do have 2 sets of minutes available for the board's review, which cover our meetings of March the 23rd and April the 6th. The first minutes to address at this point are the meetings of March 23rd, 2021. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding those sets of minutes from members of the board?
Mr. Chair, if we could just
yes,
note my recusal from the Zero White Street proposal. We have it for the first one, but we don't note it for the second, on the second page.
Thank you. I think that would be, yeah, you're noted as abstaining, but it is probably good to of the vote, but yes, it is probably good to note that you recused yourself from that specific discussion point. So if we can adjust that in the minutes, that would be great. Any other comments on the minutes of our last meeting on the 23rd? I realized I noted that I said we were going to have minutes from the 6th, but that is tonight, and they are not ready yet. So that is a faux pas on my part, but the minutes of the 23rd are still there. Does anybody else have any additional comments?
Move to approve the minutes of the 23rd, March 23rd as amended.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Joe, for the motion and Steve for the second. Is there any further discussion from members of the board? Hearing none, I will go to a roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Orin? Orin, you're muted.
As to those matters I was participating in.
Thank you. And Scott?
Yes.
Thank you. And I will vote yes. So approve the minutes of the 23rd. And that concludes the minutes available for today's meeting. The next item on our agenda is a modification to a special permit and site plan for Blue Star Business Park Building 7, noted as 0 Leonard Street. And the applicant is looking to for a determination to proceed with a minor modification to the site plan for this building. I did see representatives from Condyne join the Zoom call. So Jeff and your team, are you?
Yes, our team is here, so you should have Brandon Carr from DePret Engineering on as well, and Don O'Neill as well is on the line.
Okay. Yep, I see all three of you. I'm not sure who's going to drive here, but you should have the ability to share your screen, so do so should you so choose.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead, Brandon?
So again, Brandon Carr from DePret Engineering. I'm going to share my screen here. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So this is so we're here tonight for a minor modification to the approved site plan and special permit for Building 7 at the Blue Star Business Park. That was approved back in April of 2019. Just to zero everyone in, I'm sure you're very familiar with the project, but Building 7 is the one here on the northern side. 4 and 5 are built. 7 just started construction a couple weeks ago. They just started clearing out there today. A couple weeks ago, I mean. So we're here just about Building 7. So the changes entail, in 1 second, I just have a plan that kind of shows the overlay. So the changes to the plan involve a reduction in size of the building and expansion of the parking area. So as approved, the building was 120,000 square feet. So you can see this 100,000 square foot section in white here. This blue section was an additional 20,000. And then this kind of orangey color was the previously the parking lot area. So the modification involves reducing the building from 120,000 square feet to 100,000 square feet and expanding the parking in that area that was formerly building. So back to the revised site plan. So you can see here, that end of the building, you can actually see it underneath here. The building used to come out here, and the building was just shaved back in area that way, and then additional car parking and truck parking was added. It came out to basically about the same amount of impervious. There was a slight gain in impervious of about 8,000 square feet. And I'd like to point out the only changes are in this area, the loading, the rear area here, the rest of the footprint of the building, the detention ponds, the entrance, all stayed as approved. The utilities were modified slightly just to go back further to the new building. I mentioned an increase in impervious, about 8,000 square feet, which is, I think, about less than 1% when you look at the entire site, about 2% when you look at the entire site. And what we did was we revised the stormwater calcs to show that there was additional capacity in Basin 3. Actually, 1 and 3 remained about the same. We routed about the same amount of impervious to each one of those basins. Infiltration Basin 2 had some excess capacity, which we were able to send that increased impervious area to. We did a stormwater analysis to show that we still meet all the peak development flows for the 2 through 100 year storm, the water quality requirements, and the recharge requirements of the original application. We also filed with DEP. This site has a superseding order of conditions issued by DEP. So at the same time we filed with the planning board, we filed the site modifications with them and that same stormwater analysis. So that's basically the changes. We submitted a full plan set showing updated lighting, layout, landscaping, but it was all revolving around the changes to this area, the site here, with the building getting smaller and the parking expanding. The rest of it stayed the same.
Okay. And just for information, you said you filed with DEP. That's the letter that we have dated March the 25th to Mr. Mahala for Mass DP Wetlands and Waterways Program.
Correct. Yes, we reached out to them, coordinated with them to update that permit as well.
And just for the board's information, that is just you're stating the changes. That's not something that has been peer reviewed by Mass DEP at this point. Not saying that it needs to, but just to make sure that everybody knows what that represents.
Yeah, correct. That was our submission to them. I checked in with them yesterday and they're currently reviewing the project right now.
Okay. And obviously anything that happens needs to be approved by them from that perspective, regardless of what we take here.
Correct.
And Brandon, this is maybe to you or to Jeff. I'll let you two decide who wants to answer it, but basically you're looking for the board to determine that this is A, minor modification to the site plan, and B, to subsequently take action on that one way or another.
Correct. We're saying that yes, it's viewed as a minor modification, and that the changes are accepted by the board, and we can proceed with this this design.
Okay. And with that said, I will open it up to members of the board for questions regarding this project and this modification to Building 7, which again is to the, I'm always turned around on my compass directions here, but on the upper side of Leonard Street, as it relates to...
it would be on your left.
On the left, yes. Okay.
Chair?
Yes, Oren?
I have a question. Within the last 6 months, we went through, I thought it was a public hearing on the Building 3. We removed 16,000 square feet and added 35 parking spaces. Here we're reducing it by 30,000 square feet and adding 61 parking spaces. Why would we deal with one as a modification and the other one as a minor modification? I'm not sure how we justify that in terms of our review itself.
Are you speaking of the change to the building, which they eliminated one of the retail buildings, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Building 3 was eliminated, which was 16,000 square feet of retail.
Yeah.
And I believe also this building was 30,000, not 120. Is that correct, Jeff?
The building was 130,000 square feet. That's correct.
Okay. And the other question I have is, has the applicant contacted the Conservation Commission? This again has 4 special permits: the Zone 2, Water Resource District, Water Protection District, Floodplain District, and Stormwater. Now I'm not sure what the order from the DEP, whether those addresses all those 4 things, or whether the Conservation Commission has the jurisdiction still with regard to those. And I just ask whether or not the applicant has approached them or needs to approach them, and whether...
So, I think Brandon can describe a little bit more of the technicality, but yes, the Conservation Commission has been on site and has approved the erosion control that's been in place based on the existing permits on the pre-approvals. So has walked the site since work has started. But as technicality, Brandon, DEP runs all those conservation-related items.
Correct. I wasn't involved in the original permitting, but on this project, DEP issued a superseding order of conditions. So they become the permitting authority for wetlands related items regarding the site, so that's why we applied to them. And generally, working on other projects with DEP in the past, they would copy, reach out to Concom, provide them with a copy of it, and they get feedback from Concom as well most of the time. But the permitting is actually done through DEP.
Okay. Thank you, Brandon.
Also, you submitted 11 pages of plans. Are those changes only related to the parking areas, or are you changing building plans? Do we know what's been changed? And also the letter from the DEP is like 16 pages. And I guess you said that hasn't been approved by them, or peer reviewed, or signed off by them?
So that letter to DEP was overview of the site changes, but also that was majority of the stormwater analysis of the changes. So I think about 3 or 4 pages of that letter were narrative, and the rest was supporting calculations.
The only question is, I don't really see myself, and I don't know enough to be able to say that it wouldn't be approved anyway. I'm just curious as to why you went through the modification process for a smaller project, and I don't know the timing, whether or not, why it wasn't just as easy to go through, just ask for modification, as opposed to asking us to declare this a minor modification. I just have a problem with setting that as a precedent, because from my perspective, ultimately, there's a major project all over, so even though you're increasing parking, under MIPA, the parking would really wrap around what you're including. So I think it would come up with the later development of this project, we could still look at the parking capability. But just looking at it on its face and the significance by way of the amount of plans you've put in and the size of the project, if you reduced it and you kept the same footprint and you just brought back the parking, then I could see it. But at this point, there's plans, I don't know that, I know I wasn't capable of reviewing at this point. I don't know that the director has reviewed. I'm not sure what's in them. But I'm just curious as to why they would be called a minor modification at this point. And why it didn't go for a regular, whether just, was timing, is that tight? Or we couldn't just gotten for a normal modification?
Well, on our side, timing is tight, Oren, and based on the past, in totality, we've spent about 2 years permitting this building and the rest of the park and all the other buildings. So to rehash and go back to open meeting, going back to the individual site, we see it as a minor amendment, offsetting impervious coverage of building with parking lot. So there is no change.
They didn't acknowledge anybody.
Thank you very much for meeting your line. You took the words right out of my mouth.
So there is, no change to what's there with even less. We have less building impervious, and we have pretty much the same coverage that's done parking lot. So to go back to do this all over again, to us it just doesn't seem to make sense. And we have a tenant that's ready to go and wants to get into the building ASAP.
I mean, the last modification you did we didn't hold up at all. It was just one approval, and you elected to wait to go to the Conservation Commission to get a sign off. That's what it took. So I'm just surprised at the need to this. And again, given the scope of it, I'm concerned with setting a precedent to say this is a minor modification. I don't know if it would be allowed anyway, and I have really no major objection to it, other than to set that precedent.
Yeah, speaking for myself, I feel like removing a building off the face of the earth seems to cross the boundary from minor to major modification. So I understand raising it at that level, and whether the rest of the board feels this is a minor modification is for us to determine this evening. So, Oren, did you have any further questions at this point, or do you want me to see if anybody else has anything to add at this point?
Sure. Thank you.
If any of the members of the board have questions for members of the content team that are on the call today?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is Nick Iafredi, the building commissioner for the town of Norton.
Sure, please go ahead.
So for what it's worth, I've reviewed this with with Jeff and Don, and you know, I think, like you were just touching on, I think to remove a building in completion from the face of the earth, in my opinion, again, for what it's worth, would be a little bit more of a substantial modification to a project such as this. I think that, you know, what they're proposing is to keep the building and shrink it in size, and the rest of the site plan doesn't necessarily change too significantly. So, again, I mean, for what it's worth, I think the review that we've done and the walking that I've done with them, in my opinion, I wouldn't deem this anything more than a minor modification at best.
Thank you, Mr. Iafredi. Yeah, that's it's good to hear your thoughts. And that's what the board will evaluate their own decision. But thank you. Any other members of the board have any questions for the applicant here? Otherwise, I would look for some kind of action, whether to see this as a minor modification, or whether you need additional information in order to make that determination.
Mr. Chairman, just one other question. Do they have any idea of the timing or when DEP is going to get back to them relative to their submission?
Typically, it's fairly quick. With DEP, a lot of times views these mostly as like a minor modification, a file update. So I would anticipate we'd be hearing things in the next few weeks.
The state does what the state does, but you can go on past experience.
Yeah, every project's different, especially nowadays, but past experience, I did one similar thing. Building got smaller, maybe about 4 months ago. It took about a month to get feedback, and it all wrapped up total. So we submitted 2 weeks ago, so I would anticipate we'd be hearing in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
So do we need a motion for this? I mean, I'm fine with it being a minor modification.
I think it would be good to have a motion. I would prefer having a motion to that respect.
You do need one.
Yeah.
So
I was going to want one anyway, so.
Just backing up there. So then I'll move to do this as a minor modification.
Thank you, Steve, for the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Julie, for the second. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
Mr. Chair, so we should clarify the motion.
The motion is to deem this a minor modification, not to approve it one way or the other.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this motion specifically?
I would ask the board whether they want to consider, if they approve it as a minor modification, making it subject to the ultimate approval by the DEP in terms of their review.
The motion is just to view it as a minor modification. This isn't to approve it yet.
This, again, to restate, this motion is only to deem it a minor modification, not to approve it or deny it necessarily.
It's my understanding, once it's a minor modification, it doesn't come back before the board for approval.
It comes back the board, but it's not a public hearing.
It's still a discretionary approval.
It's still a discretionary approval, but it's not a notice application.
Yeah, town council outlined that in that letter.
Right. And Norton, in Dropbox, I had put a previous modification in one of the projects on Commerce Way, and it's a decision with that had conditions. A lot of the standard conditions were in there, but decision will need to be issued by the board.
Okay. So is there any further discussion on the motion? Again, the motion is only to deem this a minor modification. Okay, hearing none, I will go to a roll call of the members of the board. Oren?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Everybody's moved around in my meeting here, so I have to scroll through. Kevin?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So, the board is moving forward with this as a minor modification. Our next, I would defer, I guess, to the applicant. Are you looking for us to take action on this at this time? Should we so feel inclined, or would you prefer to wait for DEP to come back?
We would prefer that you take action at this time. It can be contingent to DEP's approval.
Okay. So with that said from the applicant, is there anything further other members of the board would like to add at this point regarding action on the modification and or additional conditions to consider other than contingent on approval by DEP?
A motion to approve this contingent on approval by DEP.
I'll second again.
Thank you, Steve, for the motion and Julie for the second. Is there any further discussion from members of the board on this motion to approve?
Just a quick question. We need to modify the special permit and the site plan?
Yes.
So should we have 2 votes?
We probably should, yes. Thank you, Joe.
So I'll amend mine to be the site plan.
Okay, so the motion is to amend this minor modification to the site plan pending DE pre-approval, which, Steve, I'm gonna do an add here, which would also leave all of the original conditions of the site plan in place.
Yeah.
Okay. Julie, do you see your second still stand?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this motion from members of the board?
Yeah, I just want to chastise Jeff for going in the wrong direction twice in a row.
We're bringing a long-term tenant 20 years to the town, so hopefully you're going to benefit well.
Pros and cons.
Okay. So if there's no further discussion from members of the board, I don't know why everybody keeps moving around on my screen here, but I'm going to do what I can to figure out everybody. So I'm going to start with Joe.
Yes.
Okay. Steve.
Yes.
Julie.
Yes.
Oren.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So that is the site plan motion to modify. We would still need a motion to modify the special permit. Again, pending DEP approval and leaving the rest of the conditions attached with the decision in place.
And can we clarify special permits? There were multiple.
Yes, there's 4 special permits that go with the approval.
Should we be making four individual motions, or is a blanket going to work for this situation?
Let me look back at what we did, mirror what we did with the original.
We did 4 votes for the original, I believe.
No, we did it as one. We just added them all at one.
Okay.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, because Paul, I signed one decision, right?
Right, but sometimes we take them separately, but here we did it as one motion.
Okay. So I will continue with precedent in that respect, that we are looking for a motion to modify the special permit as a minor modification pending DEP approval and leaving the original conditions in place.
I move, whoops.
Go ahead.
I move that the planning board modify the original special permits, plural.
Again, pending DEP approval and leaving everything else in place.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Joe, for the motion and Steve for the second. Is there any further discussion from members of the board? Hearing none. Joe?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Orin?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you,
and
everyone.
the rest of your team.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Look forward to working together.
I'm sure we will see you again without too much delay.
Thank you.
It's strange that we did all four of those at the same time back then. We were doing them individually, I thought.
And we actually did the site plan on the same decision too, so we've changed a bit.
Oh, no, it's easier that way, but I thought we were doing it differently.
Okay.
We are, but that was, we've changed it since. I think that was the last time we combined them all.
Okay. So, the next item on our agenda, which I think is the next two things are going to be what most people that are on the call are here for, is our continuation of our public hearings for the upcoming town meeting warrant. First one up is the proposed rezoning of 0 Rear East Main Street, which has been referred to as the Mass DOT property in a few different locations. So I do see that we have representatives from DEP here on the call here. Paul, I'm not sure if you wanted to give an initial overview based on some of the reviews that you had done in terms of kind of a high-level view of Norton and its developable land, or if you wanted to let Mr. Cox and others take the lead.
I'm going to go ahead and let Tom and his team, and I see Representative Barrows is here, and I know Mike Units is on the call as well. So, Chair, I don't know if we want to, since Representative Barrows, I mean, certainly your decision. If
sure,
I would prefer to wait and just give my little presentation after DOT.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I need to recuse myself from this.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Understood. Okay. Well, Representative Barrows, if you would like to take the floor here, metaphorically speaking, since we are virtual and there is no actual floor, I'll let you kind of, again, introduce yourself to members of the public who may not know your face and name initially, and just kind of go right ahead.
Absolutely. Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for all the participation tonight. My name is Jay Barrows. I've served the town of Norton since 2007, or I guess we would say half the town of Norton since 2007 is your state rep. This is in my district, and Steve Howitt from Seekonk represents the other half, and it basically splits at 140 in the center of town. This parcel, just for some historical perspective, the state has been slow over the years to release things around the highway. And I started probably a decade ago talking to folks at MassDOT and others about the possibility of trying to make a better and higher use of that particular land with 100% consideration to protect the Canoe River, which, as you all know, that services 13 towns. And when I started in 2007, some of you may recall, we began a move to improve the sewer capacity in Norton, Mansfield, and Foxborough. And we spent a decade working on that project that allowed for the expansion of the treatment plant and Norton's ability to be in charge of their own destiny for wastewater. The town of Mansfield divested themselves of ownership. The plant, as some of you may know, is in Norton. The town of Mansfield divested their ownership of it. Each of the three communities weighed in on what they thought the capacities would be, for the future. And we arrived on a regional, and perhaps one of the first in the Commonwealth, regional sewer authority. And that has allowed us to see some growth in all three towns as a result of having that infrastructure in place. Since 2007, we've been working with MassDOT to get signalization. This was before the Houghton Farm in New England Golf Center was even thought of being sold. But to improve that intersection because of the safety of it was just, it was very dangerous, and it took us, here we are, I think the lights might have been turned on or are close to, I know they've finally been erected. We worked with the feds to develop the expansion of the bike trail from the Mansfield Airport all the way now down to Taunton, and that's on the federal tip, which soon the process will begin to develop that. Since I've been in office, I've seen the completion of Red Mill. I've seen completion of the East Main Apartments. I've seen, kind of a resurgence of the 495 Marketplace and the building that houses the Dunkin' Donuts and a number of other offices. So it's really caught on. And what was always a disappointment to me was when I drove by that site, knowing again that the state owned it, what we have sitting out front is 3 or 4 ugly buildings and a few trailers and a couple of salt sheds and a couple of rusty trucks on perhaps one of the most prime pieces of real estate, certainly across the street from Blue Star. So it's with that in mind that I hope tonight that the planning board will consider zoning that industrial to give us the greatest and highest possibility of use. We were so fortunate, and I have to thank Mike Units. He did a great job in helping secure an island. We were able to get a TIF through, which again helped. That project has brought a huge number of jobs, a huge revenues, present and future, both in building permits and in future taxes. And I do believe, from what I hear from all my friends at the state, is that bio is really what's next in coming. Obviously during this pandemic, the last 13 months, things have been put on hold, but there seems to be a reset. And Massachusetts is certainly the home to an incredible medical community, research community, and a tremendous talent base of people that could move into this biomanufacturing field that exists. I look at what Wheaton's done with the Mars building that they built back in 2009, 2010 for life sciences. I look at what Bridgewater State College has done. I look at what some of the partnerships that an island is now forming with Southeastern Regional Votech School. So we've got the talent, we've got the infrastructure in place, and it's one of the few sites in Massachusetts that is right on the highway. Yes, there are some abutters, and we need to be mindful of them, and that's the job of obviously planning and zoning. But at the same time, I just hope that this will really put, if we're fortunate, we don't know what the future lies, but if we are fortunate to land another life sciences, like we have a number of them in Mansfield, back in 97 or 98, we did a bio overlay district to allow the biomanufacturing to take place. We did it also up by National Lumber. We have a Mansfield Bio It's a startup lab that they're looking at adding 100,000 square feet of lab space. So the opportunities are out there. There are people that are moving around. Unfortunately, we have to compete with every other state, but they do not have the talent that we do. We are so blessed to have that. Got transportation nearby. We're close to Greene. We're close to Logan. We're close to Worcester. And I really think that the opportunity exists for us to accept the land. The state's going to collect the money, the property value. They're going to put it on the market and sell it to the highest bidder. But we need to have it set up in a way that people can come in and know what they can do. And still, many of the proposals that might come forward would still need special permit, and obviously the planning board's interaction with that. But I think we are poised to go. If we ended up with an island, we would be on par with our commercial and industrial tax revenue, very similar in percentage to both Mansfield and Foxborough. And I know both Mansfield with Cabot Park and Foxborough with Patriot Place, it has helped the residents tremendously to offset some of those real estate taxes that continue to go up, as we all know. Norton has an equalized tax rate, which is extremely unusual in this part of the state. And I think you're really poised to benefit from all those things that you've done. And the investments that you've made in the schools, the seats that we have available in the schools to attract people to come to this area. And it really is it would be a tremendous regional benefit. So I'm supporting industrial zoning to get that manufacturing in, and promise to work as hard as I have in the past to promote Norton. We've got a very strong Chamber of Commerce who is continually about our community, and I know we can do it, and it'll be a big help, all the way around. And it's really I have to thank both Tom Cox and Craig McCune for their help in sticking with it, because I've bugged them a long time, and they had to bug a lot of other people to get somebody to release this thing. So it's all good news, and again, I appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness on it. And look what's happened across the street. It's phenomenal, and congratulations to the efforts there and how well that looks and how it fits. And it's going well, and we've got people that are walking around there every day looking for additional opportunities. So I say mirror it on the other side of the street and see what we can do. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me a few words, and certainly take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Barrows. I do see a virtual hand raised. Not sure if that's a question for myself and the board, or whether it's a question for Representative Barrows, Mr. Toole. But
no, it's I guess when it opens up, when the board is done with their questions and feedback. I'd just like to get in line for that.
I will keep you in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And just for members of the public, if you're not aware how Mr. Toole got that hand in his virtual screen there, if you look to the bottom of your Zoom meeting, there's a reactions button. If you click that, you will pop up in the top corner of the Zoom meeting with that over your camera, and that's an easy way to signify that you would like to speak. Again, thank you, Representative Barrows. If members of the board have anything specific that they would like to ask at this time, or whether whether it makes sense to move and hear from Mr. Cox or Mr. McCune from DOT as a next step here.
I am happy to, Mr. Chairman, as Tom Cox, I'm happy to jump in if you like.
Sure, thank you.
With your approval, I'd like to share my screen.
Sure. And just for the board, is this a specific document that we have in our folder, or is it the updated presentation?
So I was going to start with the GIS webpage and then quickly go to that presentation.
Sure.
I'll be quick.
Sounds good.
Very good. So this is one of my emails. So, Mr. Chairman, representatives, planning board members, selectmen, town manager, My name is Tom Cox. I work for a company called Rezoning. We provide real estate services to the MBTA. And we've been working with Craig McEwen from MassDOT, who's on the line, and Zach Worth from my office on the line as well, for the last couple of years. Just to kind of go backwards or reset the table, make sure that we remember the history of the technical forward. As the representative said, a lot of time and effort has gone into creating infrastructure and tools to allow for non-residential alternative tax base here in Norton. Many years ago, the request came in to think about this MassDOT property, which is here on the screen. You all know your town. 495 is here. 323 cuts across the spine of the town. Eastern is to the north. Mansfield is to the left. And we are here right off of, obviously off of 495. So great vehicular access right off the highway. As the town asked MassDOT to think about repurposing its site, about 36 acres plus or minus, we obviously have active operations. We have governance, as I said last time we met. We have a district office that's there. It doesn't look like much, but it's important. We also use exterior portions of the property for what they call project laydown, which is to store for materials that are happening in this highway district. As noted in the past, the property was, many years ago, was asked to be repurposed, and it took Craig, myself, and others to convince stakeholders to think about this property, for an alternative use, because whether it's MassDOT or the MBTA or other operational services, it's difficult to give up land that you already control. It's difficult to give up that land that you already control because you never know but where growth is going to occur, where you're going to need more space for a larger solid shed, alternative truck storage, fill in the blank, and it's just from any operational use, it's good to have land in various parts of any district. Again, that's from any operational perspective, whether it's MassDOT, MBTA, or your local Department of Public Works or others. So it took us a little while to kind of get to the point where we're at. It was asked last time, why we were thinking kind of about industrial uses and versus commercial uses, and we, MassDOT, took a step back to look at how we could be successful on the site. Because as I noted, we have a solid shed on the site. It's going to take a development to fund the relocation of those salt sheds, whether it's on site or off site, 100% or not 100%, but very likely that it will be on site. But the existing salt sheds are strategically placed right where a roadway would naturally intersect with the the signalized intersection that's being constructed. So any project is going to have to pay for those relocations. On top of, as I said previously, and I don't want to necessarily speak for Craig, you can confirm this, is that, MassDOT, whether here or other locations, aren't necessarily interested in, nor can they, come out of pocket to fund relocations of their operations. And as I said before, it's always good to have property in reserves, for whatever that use may be today, tomorrow, or many years kind of into the future. So it can't be a push either, lack of better description. So I think the example I used previously is if the market value is $2 and it costs, $1 to relocate it, is $2 kind of enough, or $1 a profit kind of enough, knowing that, there's a premium cost associated with the development of this parcel of land. So they'll have to weigh that $1 in my example against whether or not giving out the future flexibility of control over this property is worth that $1. So that's why we're kind of thinking about the highest and best use of the site. I'm going to present kind of in a minute, and I'll do it quickly and allow Paul to, lack of a better description, to fact check me. With your zoning code is, and we said it last time on this hearing process, is that the uses are very similar, but yet there are significant differences as well. In your town, and I'm just going to, again, as I smooth my face over here for a minute, I'm going to toggle on your webpage. So this is your zoning districts that are showing on the parcel plan. Purple is industrial, red is commercial. last couple of times when we talked a lot about the uses that are over here in the purple area, which are across the street, which is good and important to talk about those. But you all have another zoning district that's down here. Another zoning district, well, I'll defer to Paul on. But down here is where an island is. And they are a life sciences company. As I do my setup here, and thinking kind of about the economic value of this property, how to fund relocation of our services, how to provide for the best path forward for the highest and best use, not only from MassDOT's perspective, but the community's perspective, is there's really two real strong markets that exist in the Commonwealth right now. And this is a little bit pre-COVID. It's not only about COVID. Is this operations and logistics? Everybody uses Amazon. Amazon is 101 locations across the Commonwealth right now that allows them to be totally flexible. That is all. I also noted in the past too, up in the city of Boston, whether actually it's in the city, Quincy, other communities, residential real estate values are through the roof. So there's a lot of transition of commercial and industrial space to high density housing in South Boston, Dorchester, other neighborhoods, Hyde Park, fill in the blank, Quincy, that's really putting pressure in other areas as far down as Norton, actually, that is making not only the Amazon phenomenon, lack of a better description, but also other things that are happening kind of in the industrial market, pushing out logistics, so what have you. So that is an active market. It's a good market to kind of have. We also have in the Commonwealth life sciences. Life sciences is really broken down into two different separate entities. One is research, and the other is the manufacturing of the life sciences product. The research, the real research, or the big research is 9 out of 10 times, it's confirmed by discussions over the last week with significant landlords that do a lot of lab space development, very active in the Massachusetts and actually United States area. It's really up in Cambridge. Second largest, believe it or not, I'll share an interesting statistic with everybody, is Seaport District is actually the second largest life sciences market kind of in the United States, believe it or not. So it's Kendall, Seaport District, because Kendall and Cambridge was getting saturated, and then San Diego and some other locations. In and around Massachusetts, and the reason why I'm kind of doing this setup here, in and around Massachusetts, when it comes to life sciences, suburban markets are where the manufacturing is being serviced. So you've got an island, there's other locations that I heard about in other abutting communities, but that's about this part of 485 to west of 485, inside of 128 belt. Yes, there is research going on in Watertown and other locations, but the true suburban locations like we find down here in Norton truly is that manufacturing. And that's why preserving the industrial request that we have is important, at least to us right now, to make sure that we have success and the potential of the highest level of success as well. We also, I'm also going to quickly note before I go back to the PowerPoint, is down here where Nile is, again, I defer to local town people to fact check me on this, is that the real estate taxes are dramatically higher, like 8 times, 7 times higher than industrial. So to the extent that we're all lucky enough, if we create, allowed the opportunity to have a life sciences here, the real estate taxes and then also the personal property taxes are just, there's really no difference between industrial. Great to have it, I get it, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad use. We'll have those uses in industrial like we have in commercial, but to be able to create the highest property value, longest term real estate tax value, for both the town and the Commonwealth, that's why industrial is important. I'm going to quickly jump to my PowerPoint presentation. So I'm starting on slide 2. Actually, let me just quickly go through this. This is the intro. This is the parcel of land that we, just a quick reminder, 37 acres approximately, frontage on 185, 123, we know that. The town, I'm just going to quickly note, the town owns this approximate 10-acre land that buffers it from the development to the top of the plan here. I'm going to show you a little bit more the actual setbacks associated with that, and the setbacks in the different zoning districts kind of in a moment. I noted before that we've got active operations on the site that need to remain. They need to service 2023, the highway, etc. This is just another view of the zoning map that I was, or excuse me, your GIS system that I was just showing a minute ago. Purple is a wellhead district. It's what you really see when you look at this graphic quickly. There's a lot of uses that require, whether they're allowed in the zoning district, they're also allowed special permits because of there's particular uses because of this particular classification. This particular classification encompasses over 2/3 of the site, approximately, as you can see here. And we also have the Canoe River to the top left, which has its floodplain and wetlands as well. So this site, presently owned by MassDOT, to the extent it goes out to bid, will need to comply with all state, local, and federal rules and regulations. So there's no relief because it happens to be a state property. Just want to be clear on that. So it will need to go for the town for special permits. It will need to go before the Commonwealth, and we will require this from the MassDOT's perspective in our ITB, and I'll touch on this in a summary, is it will need to go through the MEPA process. So it will, we will mandate as MassDOT that it goes through an ENF process, which takes into consideration wetland impacts, floodplain impacts, areas of critical environmental concern impacts, traffic impacts, etc. We will require that an ENF process, which will include the local community to go through that process, the developer to do that. So there'll be the local look and the state look kind of as well, with the additional level of review and approval process, because we have the floodplain and the wetlands here, because we've got the wellhead district. I'm being repetitive because I want to truly create the impression of the amount of regulatory review that will be required kind of on this site and the protections that will come with that. As I said before, we MassDOT are seeking the industrial district. Across the street is Blue Star, which is zone industrial. To the top of top right of the plan, so to speak, is commercial. MassDOT, this property is presently zoned residential 80, I believe, which allows residential uses, duplexes, a cluster type development, etc. While housing is a Commonwealth initiative, I think we all know from Housing Choice, the legislation that was passed at the state level, we heard from the community time and time again that this is not a housing site that we want to think about, but it's truly a economic development commercial tax-based site. That MassDOT is totally interested in helping and work with the community to try to pursue, but we need to make sure that the appropriate uses are there to create the highest and best use. This is your zoning district. I took bits and pieces of this to make sure and try to create an impression. And for the record, I know I'm going fast, so please everybody slow me down, Mr. Chairman, or the board members, and I'm happy to answer questions too. And Paul, again, fact check me on this, to make sure that I'm speaking with accuracy. This slide here shows your dimensional requirements in the town. The setbacks that are different between commercial and industrial. The impression that I want to create with you on this slide is what's shown here in red, is that to the extent that you have an alternative zoning district, from an abutting one, there's different buffer requirements. Industrial requires 100 feet, commercial requires 50 feet. So what does that mean? That means that the town parcel of land that I noted previously, the buffers from Redgate, and then, we've got floodplain towards the back, you need to have a 100-foot buffer. So it's a 50-foot extra buffer, that is required because of industrial. Just wanted to make that impression. So you're pushing development away from abutters if it's industrial versus commercial. Those are the rules. Additionally, showed down here at the bottom is that any property in the industrial or commercial district that seeks to build greater than 10,000 square feet requires a special permit. So there's one special permit that that the town will get a look at. When the building is greater than 10,000 square feet, as we've seen across the street, et cetera. On top of the being repetitive for a reason, but on top of what's inside the wellhead district that require maybe additional second special permit, that are discretionary permits at the local level. We have here the industrial zoning district. So what's shown here are the differences. Other ones that are consistent here, I'm not necessarily showing. So this isn't, I don't want to create an impression that this is only that's what allowed in your industrial areas as far as your zoning code. These are the differences. So meaning if it's another use that's not shown here, it's because they're allowed in zoning. So just by way of example, banks, administrative offices, etc., they're both allowed from a commercial perspective in industrial and commercial. So I didn't note it here because I wanted to save space. Retail shops as well are both allowed uses, special permits, because they're likely to be above 10,000 square feet. And then gas stations are also allowed, and auto repair is also allowed kind of as well. But because those are uses that require special permit because of the district, they'll require kind of that. The impression that I want to make in this slide here is that the one difference, and it's an awkward one difference, so I apologize, is adult uses. Adult uses are allowed in industrial by special permit, but they're prohibited in the industrial. However, and I'll show this on a plan, and encourage people to fact check me on this, is that your zoning allows a 1,000 foot setback from adjacent zoning districts. This site, after you do a 1,000 foot setback, is not a adult any amusement site. You'll see that on a plan that I'll show you in a moment. I just wanted to call that out, that while one could say, myself could say, well, adult uses are allowed here, they're not, because of the additional protections that your town put into place to protect. And then there's the marijuana stuff that you all are well versed in from a zoning perspective, and it's you need to be in an overlay district to allow. We're not talking about an overlay district on this site at this point, so not allowed uses. Industrial district. What I wanted to show here is obviously the differences here, and I noted a moment ago about the life sciences and the difference between research, which is mostly done up in Cambridge, and then manufacturing, which is done in suburbs. Not to say that it couldn't happen, but it's mostly done in suburban type locations. Has been permitted through this manufacturing line. Nylum over off of Thomas Way came in underneath the manufacturing provisions of the bylaw. To the extent we're not in the industrial district, something like that would not be kind of allowed. But again, an island, other uses might require and might be in floodplain districts, which an island is, and they'd have to they got special permits, and people at the permitting level got comfortable with the uses that were there. Machine intensive uses, auto body are allowed. But again, they would trigger special permits because of the location in the district, the vast majority of them, that I wanted to note this. So I'm doing this fast by only a reason I don't want to take a lot of time. I'm happy to revisit all of this and answer questions. I noted earlier about the setbacks. So this orange line here is the MassDOT town line, the property line. The bottom of the plan is the MassDOT property. To the north is Red Mill Village. The town owns a 10-acre parcel of land, plus or minus. It's got a recreation use provision, I think, on it. So it's a recreation open space parcel, by the way. 281 feet of separation. Natural 281 foot buffer, plus or minus, that will always kind of exist there. So this slide here shows up close and then zoomed out kind of a little bit to show, that natural buffer that will exist. I also have here more measurements. So to the left here, this shows you that 1,000 foot setback that I noted from orange is the property lines. It goes out into 495. You start that same measurement from the other side of the highway, and you cover it again. So this site would not be subject to that type of use. To the right, you see here the 280 feet plus or minus, 281 feet plus or minus, and then I show the differences. A 100-foot setback that would be a natural buffer versus 50 that's required in the individual zoning districts. So, in conclusion, and I wish I had a cup of water, the industrial zoning district provides for the maximum opportunities, for both of us, from the town's perspective and from the MassDOT's perspective, from potential for a long-term real estate tax in the community, value to pay for the relocation of the site, value for MassDOT to get comfortable with the disposition, etc. Future development is and I'm just trying to be conservative here with the word likely. It's going to require discretionary permits, whether it be in the water protection district, above and beyond 10,000 square feet, in a building with 25 parking spaces or more. Lastly, two things. We made a comment previously, and we'll make it again, and if we've got to quote unquote put it in writing, we can. I said previously, Craig backed me up on that we will work with the town prior to a request for a proposal or invitation to bid going out. We will require the E&F process to be in there. We will, and I said before, work with the town manager as the highest level of person at the town hall. Happy to work with Paul, by the way. But that you all have eyes on this ITD before it goes out. We will have discussion about uses that would be promoted or not promoted or discouraged, lack of a better description. We'll work with you all. We do that with other towns, and we try to be as cooperative as possible. Lastly, and I'll conclude on this, is that we are not working with any developer. We haven't had any active discussions. This property needs to go out to bid, and that all developers will have a look at this lack of a description. Work for a company called Freestone. We have a list that has about 4,000 different developers and investor types on it that it gets mailed out to, and it's not only in the Boston market, but also in and around the New England market as well, and nationally what have you. So this will get exposed to the highest use to make sure that we capture and expose this to the highest level of developers and what have you. To make sure it gets full exposure so that, a successful person in Western Mass or Southern Maine or Indiana, that everybody will have an opportunity to look at this, compete for this, just ask me. We're really good at driving the price up, and we'll make it happen. So with that, I apologize if I was too long-winded. Just wanted to set an impression that, your zoning code is good and strong, and any use will require multiple permits. Industrial provides for the highest opportunity for MassDOT and the town, I believe. So with that, I'll give it back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the time, and I apologize to everybody in the line if I was too long-winded.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. I will email you separately about the brand of coffee that you drink. I think I could use some. With that said, I will see if any members of the board have any additional questions that they would like to ask Mr. Cox at this time. I know we do have a member of the public who's had their virtual hand raised patiently for a little bit. I know we had a chance to speak with Mr. Cox and Ms. McKean a few weeks ago, but if any members of the board have any questions that they would like to raise at this point based on this information, let's go.
Mr. Chair, this is Kevin. I want to ask Mr. Cox, did you mention that that the salt shed in the DOT facility would be moving off-site, or would have to find another, space on these parcels?
Thanks for that question. So it's highly likely that it will remain on site. I'm saying highly likely. I want to preserve the opportunity to maybe relocate it off-site. I can honestly say, when developers have come in and said, you've got the A location, I've got the C location, go to the C location, and MassDOT will give you some money to do it, they don't work out. But if there's a scenario where it can get located off-site, that'd be great. I don't want to make a false promise on this, Mr. O'Neill. So it's likely to stay on site. But I think we can say, that perhaps if it gets relocated on site, it's MassDOT site, it would get relocated outside of the well protection district. Again, we need the sufficient economics to make that happen, but that could possibly happen.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. My only other comment around that is, in a commercial zone, public or government buildings or uses are allowed in a commercial zone. They are not allowed in an industrial zone. So if the DOT operations move to another part of this site, would it no longer be considered grandfathered and therefore not permitted in an industrial zone?
This is Craig McEwen, Mass DOT. For transportation purposes, we're not subject to local zoning anywhere in the Commonwealth.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions from members of the board? I do see the town manager with his hand up as well. Hearing nothing, I'll, Mr. Toole and Mr. Units, I'll let the two of you decide who would like to speak first here, since I am not getting in between the two of you.
I think Mike outranks me, so let him go. We'll let him go first.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to emphasize the same thing that has been said previously, that I think the industrial use will give us the best opportunity to be successful. Obviously, the high bay market is very successful in this area right now, and there still is a demand for the high bay market. The difference between the high bay market and a project such as Alnylam is the building that you talked about tonight. The permit fee on that will be probably in the area of $166,000. The permit fee for Alnylam was $1.7 million. So that is a revenue the town can desperately use. And also a project like Alnylam, the truck traffic on that is probably less than they'll be coming out of some high bay market warehouses. And I really think for the town, and especially with the buffer zone that we'll have between this site and Red Mill Village, with the property that we have, that is Article 97 property, I think it will work well. And also, as part of this project, for any of you that have pulled out of that Dunkin' Donuts before and hope you're gonna survive pulling out of there, the hope is that with the traffic signal there, we can redirect the exit out of that Dunkin' Donuts to the traffic light, so that traffic will be coming out at that one spot, with the light being a much safer exit out of there. So I just really hope we have your support. I want to thank Representative Barrows and Howard for all the work they've done on this over the last few years, and to Tom and Greg for the work they've done working with us on this to try and get this property back on the tax rolls in the town of Norton. It's been off the tax rolls since probably the mid 70s, and it would be nice to get this back on the tax rolls. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Units. Absent further comments from the board, and they have been, I haven't heard anybody speak up yet. I'm not that much of an overtalker. Mr. Toole, I will let you go ahead and add if you have any questions for representatives from DOT or otherwise. Go ahead.
It's more of a statement, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your time, and thank the board. And wanted to also thank Representative Barrows and Representative Howard. They have been kind of pulling at this in the DOT for quite some time to make this property. I know when we established on the ED as a member of the EDC in town, we were really focused on this property and really wanted to get it back into the rolls, as Mike had said. One of the things, obviously, that you already know, Norton's, and what I'm trying to do is empower the board to really lead this as industrial, because I think it gives us the best options. I know that Mr. Cox talked about the new life science, and this is the hottest subject here. And I think for our town, it's very attractive, because it's one of the only towns on 495 in this area that have 2 exits. We have that single tax rate. One of the things that we've done at the EDC also is we recently went from I believe a gold standard, and Paul can correct me if I'm wrong, a gold standard to a platinum standard in a biotech rating for the town, trying to attract new life science to the town. This was one of the EDC's goals. And when they looked at this project, they really, they passed it unanimously with the goal of industrial. Obviously, they don't dictate, this board does. So they obviously, the EDC will always sort of surrender to the planning board on that. But the other thing that really attracts it to a larger business and is when you look at Taunton, they're 33.28 in the tax rate, commercial tax rate. Mansfield's 22.58, Attleboro's 21.22, Norton's 14.93. This is a property that's tucked away, and there's a buffer from residential. It's tucked away for development for a life science partner to come in there with great highway access. And I really, really would encourage the board to keep this industrial so we can try to attract a new life science partner in town. Because as Mike said, one of the things that Mike didn't mention was when you look at the Anilum excise tax rates, forget about the permitting rates. What we've gotten on the permit side, the excise taxes have been through the roof as well. And I think it won't keep pace if you guys go with the commercial side of this. So with that said, I'll wrap up there. I really would encourage this board. I understand the concerns to the neighbors and so forth in this area and other industrial property, but I think this lot is designed for that. And I would encourage you to really vote and keep it industrial. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Toole. Mr. Perkins, I do see your hand raised as well. Again, you are I'm gonna mess up your title. You're the chairman of the board of trustees for Red Mill Village, which is the residential development adjacent to the town parcel, which is adjacent to this section of land. Please go ahead. I know we have your letter, but always happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to go back on the letter. I just would like to point out and ask the planning committee and anybody from the town council that might be on this call to really think about this buffer zone that is between the site we're talking about and Red Mill Village. That buffer zone, if I hear and see correctly, is 281 feet. To put that in a little perspective for those of you who are baseball fans, that's closer than the left field wall is to home plate at Fenway Park, like 20 feet. That's not very far away. So I think that the town will probably, knowing this town and other towns like this, will probably eventually allow that land to be sold. But I would hope that and request that the planning board and any councils on will think about remediation between Red Mill Village and that piece of property, somewhere on the town property, that 281 feet, potentially maybe a wall or a high berm, or plant a lot of trees or something, because we're going to definitely see, if they're high buildings, we're going to definitely see them, and we're going to hear more from potential trucks that are there, as well as probably more of the highway, because there'll be a lot of trees that will be taken down through the years to make this area. So that's what I'm asking today, is that just keep some sort of remediation in mind and work towards that to help out the 252 homeowners at Red Mill Village. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you very much, Mr. Perkins. Are there any comments from, I'll go again to members of the board briefly, since I haven't asked that question in a few minutes. I do see a member of the public who would like to speak. But again, Oren, I'll call on you here again. While you're a member of the planning board, you're recused from this matter. You're speaking just for yourself as a member of the public. You're muted at the moment as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oren Siegel, 28 Cotting Road. That's in Red Mill Village. I have just a couple of quick questions. At the last meeting, we raised some questions again about the traffic impact, and the question was raised whether there could be some restrictions as to not adversely impact the traffic. I don't know if DOT has looked at this site and looked at the traffic demands and the potential traffic requirements of the development of this site, whether they have any restrictions that they could put in terms of their bidding, or any suggestions in terms of making sure how to mitigate some of the potential concern we have, especially once Blue Star is fully built out, and now with this additional site being built out for either commercial or industrial, whether they had any thoughts as to what could be done to mitigate the damages, and whether there is any kind of conditions they could put in their bidding process to help that situation.
Sure, thank you, Aaron. I think, Mr. Cox, I think you mentioned this a little bit in your overview, that as part of this bid process, any developer would go through MEPA and would also go through, I believe the acronym you said was EMF or ENF?
ENF, Environmental Notification Form.
Okay. And as part of that process, MEPA has a traffic element, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So would that be the extent of kind of the traffic overview that would be expected for this project, or would there be, as Mr. Siegel said, the potential for additional?
So not knowing the exact use of the property today and where, MassDOT kind of is ultimately going to end up on the site, et cetera, I think saying that the proposed project will go through the ENF process, we can say, that it will link up with the existing intersection, that will coordinate with the existing intersection, and that you will go through the ENF process, which requires, the town and others to kind of comment. So it'll be that public process. So I think, long-winded way to say that we're totally committed to requiring that state process in addition to whatever the town kind of requires. I also said too is that we will. It won't be a surprise when this goes out. This ITD. This is. We will work with town hall. We'll work with the town administrator. On this getting released. Make sure she. I know it's Mike. I just want to. That it gets town hall approval. I guess what I'm trying to say, and that will. We'll feel good. MassDOT in the town when it goes out. So, not totally fresh, but that's a huge, not conception that would have you that a private developer, I'm not sure, is going to give, but because we are a sister, first cousin, agency of any town, we extend that courtesy to every community that we're doing something.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Or did you have any additional questions?
Yes. Just a note, and I understand the demand and the need to go forward for an industrial site. I just wanted to just point out, again, when we did the Blue Star, it was for an identified project, to identify types of tenants. I don't know whether the Blue Star would have been approved if you said it was going to be heavy manufacturing and the like. So it gets a little concerning when you say, I understand there's a need to try to target a particular use, but when it could be any one of those uses, basically not all special permits are equal. I mean, a use permit is very different than some of these other permits, which really have to be based literally on what's within the bylaw. And basically they can comply with that. However, one of the concerns, because it is such an environmentally sensitive area, that things go wrong. And when things go wrong in a bad situation, they can really impact the town. And that's what the overall concern is. So I would hope with the conditions you can impose, maybe you can skinny down those things that would most be onerous in that environment to maybe eliminate them. I don't know if you can. The other question I had is for the town manager. Just question whether the town has any plans for that parcel that's now located between the DOT and the Red Mill Village.
Sure, I think Mike, you can answer this, but I think it was said earlier that this was had a recreational restriction on it, correct?
Right, Mr. Chairman, it's passive recreation. That's all that can go on that site. So, if at some point the town wanted to put ball fields there or something, they could. But other than that, that's all that the town can put on that property.
Thank you.
And as Mr. Perkins has said, it's not big enough for Fenway, so.
I might be able to reach the fence there.
Okay. Mr. Wiggins, I do see your hand raised there, so if you want to unmute and if you want to add any comments for the record on this, go for it.
Yes, that 495, 133 is a dangerous intersection, and I remember one time back in 1999 that there was a truck fire accident that took place there, and also this is what 195 and 123 looked like back in November 1980.
Cars looked a little bit different back then, Peter.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't seen anybody else raise their virtual hands here in terms of adding additional questions or comments. I'm going to thank Mr. Cox and Mr. McEwen for all their time, as well as the town manager. Again, the ask before us is to provide a recommendation for the town meeting. If there are any additional questions, we can take them and address them. I believe this is our final meeting scheduled for these articles prior to town meeting, Paul. I see your virtual hand up, so I will let you go ahead.
If you're okay, if I can get just a few minutes to look at or discuss the current condition of industrial land in Norton. We've heard, from Representative Barrows about their state and region. We've heard a lot about this site. But I have some research I've done on the town.
Yeah.
If you're okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I'm going to share my
something
screen.
that does make sense for a director of planning and development to have research on, so go for it.
Yeah, and in the last year, one of my roles, a big part of my job now is with is economic development, and particularly in the last year with COVID. And so one of the things that I frequently get are phone calls from people in the real estate community asking about available properties, vacant land, and that sort of thing. And we didn't have anything. We had nothing. And so we've added some tools to our economic development page, but one of the things that was really pressing that I worked on actually a few months ago was a simple vacant land inventory of commercial or industrial land. And so I'm just going to talk about the current conditions. I mean, Tom went over the special permits, and you all know special permits better than anyone. So, based on the work I've done in the inventory, we have 270 estimated gross vacant acres of land on 15 parcels. That's gross. So that's about the maximum. There could be some hiding somewhere, but not a significant amount. And this also includes Blue Star Phase 2 and some other parcels that that list includes the Blue Star and some parcels we've had discussions with people interested in, but since they haven't pulled permits, it's still on the list. But presumably that number, the 270, will drop, there. But in addition, another big factor is that gross amount doesn't include a number of restrictions, environmental restrictions and our development restrictions. I won't go through all of this. You can see this here, but I think a couple of the big ones will be in industrial. You only get 33% building lot coverage. So the building cannot occupy the entirety of the building because it can only go up to 33%. And then anytime the building gets bigger, parking tends to grow, your stormwater gets bigger. So there's a lot of restrictions. The other thing I want to point out is, roughly about 40% of the town is wetland and floodplain. Those are big issues that, as we deal with this on every project that comes in, it seems. So it takes a lot of property out of the development because we don't want to touch wetlands or floodplains. We shouldn't. And then there are some parcels that are zoned industrial, but they have another zoning district with them. One that comes to mind is Zero Rarity. We're dealing with the residential side, but the south side of the pond is actually zoned industrial. I just want to know, just show as an example. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to the GIS screen and just show.
I think it's been well established that Norton zoning map is not exactly coherent.
But at least it's digitized now. But okay, so going back to this area along Commerce, I to move this real quick so I can get to that. So just as an example of environmental restrictions, this parcel highlighted right along South Washington and Lopes. The board, you'll remember this, you recently endorsed an A&R within the last year here. They split this into 2 lots. But as you can see, this is all wetlands. If you remember that parcel, that's a lot of wetlands through it. And in fact, our conservation director said that this map is just an estimate. And oftentimes, the actual delineation of wetlands or floodplain is actually even larger. So here's a 724,000 square foot parcel, which you probably can get this corner here, or this parcel here, maybe something up through here. This is, not, the rest of it's not developable. So that's a huge chunk that gets taken out. And this is not a rarity. I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. The other thing I just wanted to point out here is, okay, so we're at Hill Street. I'm going to turn the zoning layer back on. So Hill Street is at a place where it's a hard edge between industrial and residential zoning. So you have residential development there, and it's facing industrial zoned land. This is not I would say, not a great situation, but it is what it is. And if developments come along in this area, obviously we will use our regulations and special permits to try to protect the adjacent neighborhood from this. But this is actually fairly normal. If we zoomed out, which I'll do, you'll see the same thing on South Worcester Street. We'll see it on Taunton, where we have, residential splitting some fairly narrow roads, narrow roads splitting industrial and residential. A lot of these places don't have a 300-foot buffer. And I'm not saying that the neighborhood's issues shouldn't be addressed. Obviously, they should be. But we have this area where the DOT property is actually better buffered than a lot of our industrial zoning adjacent to residential. Just one more thing I want to show. I'm going to switch back. And this, again, this builds on, it was something that both Representative Barrows and Tom were talking about, but I want to give you the Norton context. So, I just want to mention too, that, I can't tell you exactly how many developable acres are remaining in industrial, but it's not 270. It's probably under 200 acres. This seems like a very low inventory. I'm not an expert in this, but I talked to someone I met today who's a commercial realtor. She couldn't tell me what the threshold is for a low inventory. But one thing she did give me is information specific to Norton, and she was showing me how much industrial growth has happened in Norton in just the last year. So when she sent this to me, I just said to her, wait, what am I looking at? And she said the main number to look at is the one I've highlighted, and that's a 12-month net absorption percentage of your inventory. 26% is a very high number. By comparison, by that same period of time, office has only grown by 0.2%. 0.2% versus 26%. So, we know that COVID has had an effect of, it's exacerbated the issue, the changes occurring in the office and the retail market, right? We now know, just like we're doing now, we're working from home. That's had an effect on the office market. We're mostly shopping now on, we're shopping by our phones and getting it delivered. I myself haven't, I go to the market much less frequently now. And then I started to think, and you guys know this, and I'm not going to jump into this, but I started looking back in the 3 years I've been here, looking back at the projects, the non-residential projects that you all have approved since 2018, to look at how many of them were commercial, strictly retail commercial projects, and how many were industrial. Well, between 2018 and now, you approved 2 commercial projects, Cumberland Farms, which was recently approved, and Sweet Stuff Bake Shop at 4 Olympia Street. And at that same time, we had 6 industrial projects, including Blue Star, the original phase 1, and then some amendments to it. We also recently did the 186 South Washington Street, United Materials Management. You did the expansion at 10 Commerce Way. So you did 6 versus 2. And then I look back at 2017, the year before I started, and you did 1 additional commercial project. It was a self-storage facility at 316 East Main Street. But that same year, you also approved Spears Manufacturing and both the Noah and Ryder developments on Commerce, which are all sizable projects. So this has been going on for a while, this trend of industrial outpacing office and retail development. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to bring that, just bring that up as a discussion and really just bring this as a Norton context. But Norton is following the same direction as the rest of the state, and the information I read, it's going on nationwide or throughout many parts of the nation.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Paul. It's certainly good for developers if a quarter of the available industrial space disappears in a year. So I'm sure the rents are going up accordingly. I don't think I see any other members of the public or members of the board with additional questions. Again, if anybody has anything additional comments they would like to make, otherwise we're looking as a board to make a recommendation on this article and or suggest any changes for town meeting.
Do we have to close the public hearing first?
Yes, we would. Thank you.
Okay, unless there's more comments, I'll motion to close the public hearing.
This is Scott, I'll second.
Thank you, Steve, for the motion and Scott for the second. Is there any further discussion on the motion to close the public hearing in relation to the Zero Rear East Main Street town meeting article? Hearing none, I will go to the roll call. Scott?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So the public hearing regarding this article is closed. And if the board would like to take any further action at this time,
Well, I'll move that the planning board recommend passage of the zoning article as written.
Scott, this is Scott, I'll second.
thank you, Joe, for the motion and Scott for the second. Is there any further discussion from members of the board? Okay. Hearing none. Scott?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. So the article will be recommended to town meeting. Again, the board votes 6-0 with 1 member recused. Thank you very much, Mr. Cox, Mr. McCune, and Mr. Representative Barrows, and anybody else who participated.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Okay. The The next article for town meeting that we are reviewing is the White Street rezoning. We discussed this kind of a little bit at length here. I do see Attorney Souza with his virtual hand raise in regards to this agenda, and I'm going to hold on you for just a second. I do see you. Oren, I'll start with you here.
Yes, again, I'll need to recuse myself as in a butter.
Thank you, Oren. Paul, I'm not going to necessarily put you on the spot here if you would prefer to go after Attorney Souza, who I know is representing the applicant in this, in terms of there was some additional research done in relation to the history of the zoning map. Do you want to discuss that now or discuss that after?
I think I would just prefer to have Attorney Souza talk first, present first.
Understood. So with that, Mr. Souza, the virtual floor is yours. And I know I do see a couple of members of the Drain family here as well on the call. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you noted, I do represent Lucille Drain, and I assisted her with the preparation and submission of her warrant. It's getting late. I really don't want to reinvent the wheel, but you folks understand that the assertion that Mrs. Drain makes is that her property was once commercial, that her family never received any kind of notice of change of zoning, and that what we see now is that the zoning map shows that the property has become R80 zoning. Her parcel is 33,000 square feet. There's a tiny adjacent parcel that is, I think, approximately 4,000 and some square feet. These are not large pieces of property that can support any real extensive development. She would like to see the property returned to its original commercial zoning. And we think, in fact, that it may have been nothing more than accident, mistake, or inadvertence in looking at zoning maps that oftentimes are at a scale that it is extremely difficult to look at a tiny piece of property in relation to the rest of the town and get things right. What I point out about that is that the early zoning maps from 74, 78 show the property clearly commercial, and then later maps somehow show it as part residential and part commercial, which doesn't make sense because the zoning bylaw tells us that, in fact, zoning boundaries are typically the middle of a roadway or a stream or a river. And in the case of the, I'll call it the middle years of the zoning maps, they've moved the zoning from White Street to the middle of this 33,000 square foot lot. I think that Mr. DiGiuseppe will confirm for you that the matter, an inquiry was sent to town council asking if this could somehow be corrected administratively if indeed there was evidence of a mistake. And I believe the answer is that no, it has been too long now, and that there is no administrative solution, even if everybody agreed that one was appropriate. So what we're left with is the warrant article to change the property from R80 to commercial. And in doing this, I just simply point out to you folks that the rest of White Street, even though it may be used for residential dwellings at Red Mill Village, but the remainder of White Street remains commercial. And this is literally a small island with frontage on East Main Street. I think, I submit to you, I think it's more appropriate that it be commercial, and perhaps the site of, who knows, the law office, maybe a real estate office or some other similar use. It's not going to be a gas station. It's too small. It's in a water resource protection district and a well protection zone. I mean, when you start thinking of the things that might be considered to be obnoxious, if you will, to the neighbors, there's not a lot of things that you can do with a 33,000 square foot lot. So Mrs. Drain asks you to please recommend to town meeting that they pass this article and return her property and the tiny adjacent piece to it to commercial zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Souza. Mr. Drain, I did see your virtual hand raised. Did you have any additional further comments you wanted to raise, or do you want to let what Mr. Souza said kind of speak for itself?
I don't have a lot to add beyond what he already raised, other than just to reiterate that, my dad had purchased it back in 78 as commercial land, and, he had plans over the years to do something with it commercially. So it came as a surprise that, we found that it was identified as residential today. So, we're looking for your support to get this corrected and recommend that it be zoned back to commercial. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. And Paul, I know kind of coming out of our previous discussion on this matter, the metaphorical gauntlet was laid down at the planning board to research changes to the zoning map in the kind of those intervening years. Did you want to give kind of a summary of our findings? May not be the correct word, but our review of those records.
The review of the records that were that the applicant had collected. The
applicant, as well as kind of our review of any changes that were made to the zoning maps.
Yeah,
as they pertain to this.
Sure, and over the years, I've worked with Mr. Riley, who had been back when we were open for business. We were looking at plans, and as he documented 2 weeks ago, there were changes to the zoning map on this parcel that we can determine that at one point it was commercial. At one point it had 2 zoning districts, and then it went to residential. Now, when that happened, prior to 1999, it is not clear, and I will say we do not have the resources to review all of that information. But what was relevant was in '99, when the zoning map was completely done over, when the old zoning district was replaced by the new. This parcel was clearly zoned as residential, and presumably at that point notices would have gone out to everybody back in '99, the community. I know Mr. Souza's letter indicates that he could not find it, but as Mr. Souza pointed out, we forwarded all of this information to town council, who did say that there was a time limit that expired to have claimed a Scrivener's error.
Okay. So essentially, in terms of when the zoning map was adopted in 1999, that should have been a quote, that in theory was intended to be a quote unquote clean.
It was a new map.
Clean break. It was a new map and a clean break, so to speak.
Right. Correct.
That was adopted at town meeting.
Yes, it was adopted at town meeting.
Okay. Do we have any questions from members of the board, either for Attorney Souza or Paul, who I know reviewed kind of what was in place at what took place in '99 with the zoning map?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Kevin.
So, regardless of the history behind it and the Scrivener's error, or whatever may have occurred, I think this plot of land, independent of all of that, it only makes complete sense that it be rezoned commercial versus R80 for all of the reasons that Attorney Souza mentioned. So if we put all that history behind us, and just going forward, it seems to make common sense to me that it be rezoned commercial at this point.
Okay. Any comments or questions from members of the board? If there are none, I see 4 virtual hands raised, so I would go in that tack. And I think I've rambled long enough to give somebody an opportunity to say something. So I will start with Miss Murphy, who is sitting there. And so Carolyn, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Jerry Murphy.
Oh, sorry. It says Carolyn on the screen, so I apologize.
It isn't Carolyn's computer, and that's fine. I'm in a butter, a direct abutter, and before I moved in, I checked the zoning around the area, and I saw that it was all residential. That's why I moved in. So I will not be happy if that gets rezoned commercial. It doesn't make any sense. So we'll have to have some discussions about that as well. So I live directly across the street, and I'd like to leave it residential. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Toole, if you'd like to go ahead next. Your virtual hand was up next.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So as a select board member, we were asked to weigh in on this, and I did send an email to the chair of the finance committee, Paul DiGiuseppe, as well as, and I apologize, I did not include you directly in that email as well, Mr. Chairman. And
I believe we have a copy of that. We have something in there, in our folder here related to that, yes.
Yeah, I you know, one of the things that I, at first, this is before, I'm glad to see that this decision was made on the Scrivener's error. I was not in favor of just kind of passing it administratively. I think that would have been a big mistake because obviously at the time that, you know, Red Mill Village wasn't even built when that mistake was made, and it's just changed so much. Regarding the current proposal of there, I don't envy this board's decision, right? You've got a very unconventional lot, and if it does go commercial and there is commercial property built there, or if this is changed to commercial property, it is going to affect those residents on White Street effectively, as well as the across the street, which are very, very similar lots of residentials. I have also submitted, and I sent to the board, a petition. I think the petition also got, I think the petition may have made it there on its own as well, of 125 residents of Red Mill Village that were very concerned about changing this property to commercial, that I think the board really needs to look at and really consider changing it. But you know, at this point, I would be challenged to really change this zoning for the simple reason of the impact around the neighbors and all around it seem to be residential. And I mean, I could be wrong, but across the street's residential, and then Red Mill Village is residential. You can have one lot right there. You can grant Burning Phil's, I believe, is commercial, but that one lot is in the center of 2 residentials. I'm not sure it's benefit of the town, and it really does affect the residents as a whole. So it's just my thought, and you know, take to what we will.
Thank you, Mr. Toole. Attorney Souza, I saw your hand up next here, so I will
I was going to defer to Mr. Perkins. He's had raised the point.
Okay. Well, Mr. Perkins, I guess you're up then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would simply like to point out to the board that from what I'm listening, it sounds like the town in 1999 changed the zoning in the entire town. Whether or not homeowners were notified, obviously I wasn't around then and none of us were around. But the Drain family and the other family who owns a smaller parcel of land had 22 years to fix this. And it's not till now that they want to fix it. And if this or change, I shouldn't use the word fix, but they want to change the zoning. If they were to change it, as a number of people have said, it's going to affect many, many, many people. And I would suggest that potentially they look at that piece of land, rather than changing it or trying to get it changed to commercial or anything else, they leave it a residential, or they consider making some sort of donation to the town with the stipulation that the town uses that property for a park or a playground. Then it would probably not negatively affect neighbors on any side, and they'd get the benefit of the taking the tax write-off and the value of the property that they donate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Well, Attorney Sousa, you've delayed long enough, so you're up again. You are muted, unfortunately, sir, so you're going to have to repeat that opening line, which I'm sure was amazing.
I apologize. I do have to say that we appreciate the neighbors and their concern that the development is going to impact them. I would point out that although they live in a condominium development on White Street, I believe that White Street, where they are located, is in fact still zoned commercial. I think Mr. Giuseppe will correct me if I'm wrong, but he and I had a discussion about this previously. I would also, suggest that everyone consider that if this property remains residential, because it's been in its current form for so long, it certainly, in my opinion, is going to qualify for a small lot exemption of the zoning bylaw. It has at least 50 feet of frontage, far more actually, and that's more than 5,000 square feet. So it could support a dwelling there, the residential 80 zoning, despite the fact that, there should be 80,000 square feet. It's exempt. So the neighbors may be looking at some change, regardless of whether or not town meeting votes to change the property to commercial. The question is, what type of change will take place? I remind everybody again, because of the location, if it is commercial, it's not going to be a high impact usage, and that Water Resource Protection District, well protection zone, are going to mandate special permits even for small projects. So we hope that you consider those factors carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sousa. I would think if it was a dwelling, that it would make me have flashbacks of what is in place in Sharon on Route 27 fairly regularly. Mr. Siegel, I know you had your virtual hand raised a couple of times, and I know you did submit some.
I defer to Gary Perkins if he wants to make a comment first. That's okay.
Sure.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I want to say is if the zoning state is residential, and if a home was to be built there, I think the home would be more acceptable to the people who live on White Street. And having even a small office building there'll be a lot less traffic and a lot less dangerous situations. And we already have a White Street that we're going to try to get addressed with the town anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Siegel, I'll go to you next. Now, you did submit some reports from that annual report from 1999, which are available to the board in their folder. Did you want to kind of give an overview of those documents as well as kind of a summary?
If I could do a screen share?
Sure.
Thank you.
And again, you're just speaking for yourself. You've recused yourself from this specific matter.
I live at 28 Cutting Road, and I'm speaking for myself and not as a member of the board. Again, this is the parcel that we're talking about. I'll come back to that in a minute. Just as a quick overview, I think we've reached the conclusion in any event, but basically from the town maps that I reviewed, going back, the town map dated 1972, revised in 74, which clearly had its own residential. In June of 78, there was a special meeting, and there was a new map that was approved that did change it to commercial. Mr. Drain did purchase the property about 30 days or more right after that rezoning. Succeeding maps that I observed through May of 88 at least appear to reflect the same similar designation. In September of 1998, there was a new town master plan. Then that subsequent year is when, that subsequent year is when there was a complete revision of the zoning bylaws for the entire town. Among the things that were changed were eliminating all the old zone districts and establishing 6 new districts, basically deleting, the article in section 3.1 and inserting a brand new one. Just as of note, the next year in the town annual report under the Recreation Department, they established under their long and short-term goals and objectives, they're basically looking at that White Street for a community playground. So I just raised that in that at some point in time, I mean, that was maybe 21 years after it was acquired. If they were looking to establish that as a playground, they didn't own the property. They certainly would have been in contact with the owners of the property, who I believe at the time, when it was, they would have been, I would assume, in contact with the property. This is the 1974 plan, which clearly shows as a residential. This was the proposed zoning change, and actually the vote actually references 808 Norton as the plan they were referencing, which does show, I don't have a blow-up of it, I think they submitted a blow-up of it.
This is the map that you can't read at all, yes.
Yeah, basically. This is the annual report in June 30th. And I just want to point out that it really references the fact that they reference that they've just recently completed the master plan. And it was brought before the town, a comprehensive plan, again, eliminating all those districts and creating these brand new districts. These districts closely followed recommended changes in the master plan. Again, this is the 1998-99 plan. The annual report in the next year, again, talked about the Recreation Department, and they talked about, up here they said the development of, among other things, White Street property. Short-term proposed objective included development of a master plan for White Street community playground. That was part of the long-term plan and a long-term proposal. So this was something that the town was looking at, and I can't imagine they'd be looking at it because they didn't own it. They wouldn't be talking to the owners at the time to see what could be worked out. Regarding the lack of notice, I think I just want to point out to the town that any kind of notice, any kind of zoning change that affects the entire town, basically, there's a provision in our bylaws, 12.2, that says general notice will serve where the proposed amendment is for universal and wide application. I think this board is aware of the fact that that issue recently came up with regard to one of the projects they were looking at, in which the court basically found in favor of the town and said that they rezoned properly. So basically, when it affects the entire town, there's no individual notice. You wouldn't be expecting it, they wouldn't be giving it, and they didn't give it to anybody in the town, and they shouldn't have expected it. This just talks about 48 Section 5, which talks about basically posting and publication, which is what the town does in any event. This is just the actual section of the bylaw. Assuming now that basically, I think it's clear that the issue of notice is not one that's really relevant. I want to go to the issue of really what should be there. And what I did is, I want to just show you, this is an overview of the geomap of the area. These are all parcels, or residential parcels, all along 123. If you look at it, basically these parcels are all approximately 30,000 square feet. These up here and these going all the way up here, they're 30,000 square feet. The only two larger ones are these two right across. One is 60,000, about 2,000, each is 60,000. So they're 33,000 square feet. So to say that it's crazy to have this as an island standing alone, it's too small, that's what's on 123. That's consistent with the neighborhood. The issue of Red Mill Village is zoned commercial, but in reality, with a special permit, it has been residential for the entire period. So relative to this road being commercial, if this is residential, then at least half the road is deemed residential. The other issue that I had raised before that I think is really important is, if you want to make this commercial, how do you get access to this property? There's a limitation for a left-hand turn because of the amount of traffic that's been recognized for this site. To make a left-hand turn, to be crossing over this left-hand lane would be very dangerous. I don't even know if it would be allowed, if the state would allow them to do a curb cut right immediately across from it. In any event, if that was restricted, if you're trying to get out of this trace, you can't take a left-hand turn, you have to go right, and then you'd have to go, I don't know how far down before you can make a U-turn or turn around. You'd probably have to drive into Hastings and make a turnaround. Going the other way, if you're trying to get into this site, if you can't make a left into it, I'm not sure how you get there. I mean, unless you're going to be putting an entrance to a commercial site on Newland Street or even White Street, which is crazy, it doesn't really work as a commercial site.
And White Street is one way coming at us onto this view, correct?
Correct. Again, just a note, this was the sight line, which is kind of restrictive in any event. You saw that plan. I think the board saw this plan, but I just wanted, because this is a public hearing, I wanted everybody to be able to see it. One of the residents, the Pulos, on the day after the hearing, took these photographs and submitted them. I think they were submitted to the board, but basically they reflected on this truck backing up. Yeah, blocking traffic going both ways. And this is not the first time it happened. And this was basically a part of that process. You'll see a truck lane change. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Joe, I see your hand raised here, so I'll let you go for it.
Yeah, just a couple of points in reference to some of the things that Arne has said and one of the residents in the area. And it's hard, I've got a zoning map, and you recall, until it was digitized, well, I guess I'm showing my time on the board. We were doing zoning maps with colored pencils. It's very easy for me to understand how it was that, notwithstanding an overall town map zone change, you couldn't identify this parcel on a map that would be distributed for town meeting purposes. Because all you have to do is look at from across on East Main Street, across from Leonard Street, basically the property we were just talking about for Mass Highway, all the way up to Newland Street is zoned commercial, which of course encompasses Red Mill Village, and it encompasses the shops that are out in front of Red Mill Village, and then just beyond Newland is industrial. So this would make no sense from a zoning perspective to take a numbered route, i.e. 123, and create a little island that's residential. But that aside, it's all now past history. What's been done has been done. In terms of the reference to the Park and Recreation Department wanting to use White Street property, they weren't talking about this island. They were talking about the property that now is Red Mill Village. That was one giant gravel pit that any Sunday afternoon you'd see anywhere between 20 and 50 ATVs, motor cross bikes. That's what they were talking about. It wasn't this particular island. It was the entire parcel. That was, again, before Red Mill Village, that was what the park department had hoped to accomplish, which obviously never happened. To leave this residential, we just saw the trucks, we just saw the traffic. I know I wouldn't want to live on a house that fronts East Main Street and behind me has traffic. I mean, you're basically making this property worthless to a family that's owned it since the 70s, that has owned it with the full intention of, or the full understanding that it was commercial as originally purchased, But for someone didn't properly color in with a colored pencil, it somehow fell through the cracks and got absorbed as residential. To me, that's unfair to the property owner who's owned it since the 70s.
Okay. I know we've heard on this a lot over the past couple of weeks. Attorney Sousa, I'll let you get in one final word, and then unless there's anything further, I think we'd be looking to close the public hearing and make a recommendation.
Well, thank you. I'll be brief. That it was an error. I realized in 1999 the town vote adopted a dramatic change in the zoning bylaw, but in looking at the planning board folder, looking for a copy of the town-wide notice, I don't know if Mr. Segal can tell you that he found one. I'll defer to him, but he was examining the file the same day that I was. I never found a copy of the notice, so I have to suspect that it was an error. And Mr. Fernandez is quite right about White Street being a gravel pit. When I was a police officer in Norton, that's where the kids used to go out back and drink. And I used to have to go chase them out on the midnight shift. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay. And Mr. Siegel, I see one other hand raised here, which isn't the virtual one, so I'm going to, Janine, did you have something that you wanted to add?
I do, and thank you for recognizing me. My name is Janine Kamada, and my father bought 3 pieces of parcel in Norton in 1967. And I have been receiving notices, and I keep everything in a huge file. And I've never received a notice on that. My father passed away in 1976, and I have been the legal owner with my father for a long time. And I own right next to the drains, is it? On that parcel that intersects East Main Street and White Street very little, and then it comes across the drains property. So I have 220 feet on East Main Street and 75 feet on Newland Street. And I have great notes. I have file cabinets to prove it. And I've had this file for a long, long time after my father died in 76. And I don't ever remember getting notice for anything on this parcel. And even if it doesn't affect me, I keep them anyways. But anyways, so with that said, I don't know what we could do with it, but I am willing to work with the drains to figure out how we can make that parcel worthwhile for something. And there's always really more than one way to skin a cat. And if there was no notice, and if that is not legal, then I would like to defer to what the drains would like, and I would include my parcel with them so that we can make use of some space. And I'm all for making it safe and nicely done. I have developed some real estate in other towns, and I don't want to step on anybody, but if it really did not change to residential, then I would like for the board to consider making, correcting a mistake, you know, and whatever happens, happens, but I would just like to put my 2 cents in.
Thank you, Janine. And I apologize for making you act like you were at a baseball game waving your arm at me.
No, I was trying to show you all the huge files I have in all this. You know, I keep notices for everything.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the point made by somebody else previously was not that there was a specific notice related to this parcel.
Yeah.
But was that the zoning map that was adopted in 1999 was a town-wide notice.
Yeah.
It was basically, here's an entirely new zoning map that affects everybody. So in that case, it would generally, the determination would be whether that counts for that, so to speak.
Okay.
So.
And I apologize, I'm half Italian, so I'm always talking with my hands.
That is fine. So thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you for letting me listen and participate.
And Mr. Siegel, I see your hand raised again. You're muted at the moment, Oren, so I will...
There's an additional question of whether technically this might even be spot zoning. I know Joe's going to sit there jumping up and down saying, well, the property next to you is commercial. Actually, the use next to you is really residential. There was a special permit. And basically the test on spot zoning goes to size, anticipated public benefit, consistency with the community comprehensive plan, and consistency with the surrounding zoning and uses. So this is kind of so unique and so little that question, I think, is a valid one that you might want to take up with council, but I just want to put it out there as a note in terms of the board's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. I think we've heard a lot about this very small parcel over the past few weeks. Absent any further comments, I would look for motion to close the public hearing and then make a recommendation, whatever we feel is appropriate as members, to town meeting.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just one comment. Janine made me think of something, and she had a very creative way of looking at this. If it does not get changed to commercial and it stays R80, we don't want to see this parcel be worthless to the owner. None of us want to see that. But perhaps Paul can share with the owner some of the other options under R80 zone that could be used for beyond residential, because to Joe's point, it's highly unlikely anyone's going to build a house there. But just as an example, a use such as a private nursery school or a daycare center is allowed in an R80 zone. That's just one example, and there are several other uses that they could adopt this property before if they wanted to, so they would not be considered useless. So I just want to bring that up, and perhaps, Paul, you can share with the applicant our zoning chart so they can, perhaps look at ways to make the property, functional and worth something on their behalf if this fails today.
Yeah, I think, and we're just making a recommendation to town meeting. Town meeting can do what town meeting does. So, whether the applicant chooses to move forward with town meeting, to withdraw and continue with the residential use, or put it off for another time, because as we know, if something goes to town meeting and does not pass, then there is kind of it can't come back for a little while. So,
Tim, to that point, can I make one comment?
Please.
So I just, to Tim's point about town meeting, I think that we've heard a lot about the history and appreciate everybody's comments and the research that's been done by everybody who's been on this call the last, 2 meetings that we've had on this. I would just like to say, from my personal opinion, I think that the drains are going about the right process, given all that we've learned, to put forth a warrant to town meeting, and that ultimately it is town meeting's decision. The planning board will obviously make a recommendation one way or another, I'm assuming tonight. But I do, want to at least acknowledge that I think that they are going about the process in the right way in addressing this in the town meeting, given that is our governing structure as the town of Norton. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Julie. Absent further comments from members of the public or members of the board, I would look for an action from the board to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Julie, for the motion, Steve for the second. Is there any further discussion on the motion to close the public hearing on this warrant article? Hearing none, I will do a roll call. Joe?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
And Scott, I know he did have a conflict.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here. Sorry, yes. Sorry, Tim.
No, that's fine. I knew you had stuff going on, so I wanted to make sure you were still there. I had to scroll over. And I will vote yes. So we've closed the public hearing on the White Street parcel rezoning. And now I would look for action.
Tim, did you get Kevin?
I did not. I apologize, Kevin.
I'm a yes, Tim.
Okay. Well, we're definitely closed now. So, again, we look for a motion on a recommendation to town meeting based on all of the different points that we have heard over our past two meetings. Unless there's further discussion among the members of the board.
I'll make a motion to recommend to town meeting the warrant as written.
This is Scott, I'll second.
Thank you, Julie, for the motion and Scott for the second. Is there any further discussion on the motion, or should we proceed to a vote? Okay. Hearing none, I will go to the vote. Joe?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going slowly. I'm making sure I have this down. Scott?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
And I will vote no. So that is a 5-1, and one member is recused for this matter, so it will go forward to town meeting with the planning board's recommendation accordingly. Thank you very much, everybody who's attended the last two meetings related to this.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Okay. The last item on our agenda before we get to a little bit of planning board business is the continuation of the public hearing for 0 Rear Eddy Street. They have once again requested a continuance to our next meeting.
A motion to continue.
Hold on, we need a time and date certain.
Yeah,
so Paul, our next meeting is...
I motion to continue the 27th. That's the next meeting.
27th. Thank you, Steve, for the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Julie, for the second. Is there any further discussion? I'm not even going to pause. Joe?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Oren?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. The registry is continued. Before we get too quick in terms of additional motions, there are a couple additional items to address. Paul, you wanted to, I think as I described them, get some May meeting dates penciled in, maybe in light pencil or dark pencil, just in terms of applications that you have coming in that we don't have sufficient time to notice them for a meeting, correct?
Correct. Yeah, because if we wait until the 27th to set it, then you're not meeting till the third 3 weeks from then, and that really condenses May. So, and we should be receiving the application for the special permit for the marijuana retail at 242 Mansfield.
Okay. So your suggestion, I think based on just the calendar, was to pencil in the 11th and the 25th, with the potential for those being reevaluated as new members are brought onto the board post-election.
Well, I think we need a confirmation on the 11th.
Okay.
Because if that application comes in, we can't notice it without a definitive. So the 25th, that's up to you, to the board, but the 11th gives us a target. And, and for any new application that might come in.
Okay. So I'll put this to the 5 members of the board who will be part of the board post-election. Does May 11th work as a hard yes, I can attend this meeting, understanding that we are still in the midst of a pandemic and that's 5 weeks away?
I think both of those dates should be fine.
Good for me.
Yep, that should work.
And Kevin?
Same here, yes.
Okay. So Paul, we can pencil those in darkly. And again, as the makeup of the board shifts, we'll have more, feel more free to schedule more into the future. So that takes care of that. Oren, I know you wanted to make just kind of a personal statement before we get to that. Paul, did you want to share your screen briefly in terms of the items that we discussed in terms of the members who are not continuing with the board post-election?
Yeah, let me do that.
This is obviously Joe and Oren who have decided not to run again. But
so we'll put Oren up. We'll put Oren up first. But Tim, I'll let you as the chair.
But obviously we're not in person, so I can't hand you this. But a little certificate of appreciation for your service to the Town of Norton Planning Board since 2018. And happy to have you as part of the board.
Yeah. And I definitely want to thank you because I've learned a lot. And, I think it's, and I always I always respect anyone who's volunteering, especially for the things that they believe in. And you guys have a hard job to do. I get to mentor with a kid. That's fun. But I appreciate, Oren, all the work we've got to do, we were able to do together.
Now, Oren, as one of the, I think the newest member of the board, it's been helpful for me to kind of observe, your research techniques and the due diligence that you do. So I think it's been really helpful, and be some big shoes to fill to get a lot of that capacity back in. But we'll get there. But thanks for the time over the last couple of years. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'll definitely echo what Scott said, or I mean, the amount of time and research you put before every meeting is just incredible, and I am constantly in awe of that. And as the person who got appointed to the board at the same time as you, I felt like we made a really great pair with both of our different strengths and weaknesses, and in some ways we became a little bit of a voting block at times, and it has really been a tremendous experience to be on the board with you, to learn from you, to take from your experience, and for me personally, you are going to be, very missed on this board, and you have brought a lot, and I think, made us look at things differently than maybe we came into certain projects. So, it's been a pleasure, serving with you, and I certainly hope our paths cross again in the future.
Thank you.
And Oren, you did make us all better at what we do, and you improved the knowledge level across the team. Thank you for all of that, and I'm sure your wife is going to be happy that you're not putting as much time. Gary,
I got to tell you, when I started this, I said it's going to be an hour and a half every other week.
Oren, I told my husband the same thing.
That's my wife.
Oren, if I could, we haven't always agreed, but I've been on an awful lot of boards with an awful lot of people, and I say this absolutely without hesitation. I have never served on a board with someone who put in so much research, so much attention to detail. I wish at times we were coming at it from the same direction, but nevertheless, that's what I think that's why there are multiple member boards, because you certainly presented your case well. I wouldn't call you an adversary, I'd call you a colleague, but I don't know how else to describe your efforts. They're just yeoman-like.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, Orin, I want to second everything everybody said. You and I have not seen eye to eye on pretty much everything, but you are you are an extreme asset to this board. Just the sheer effort that you put in on, I feel like it's been a daily basis for you. That's all I can say is you've been a huge asset to this, and believe it or not, you have changed my mind on quite a few things over the years. So I really appreciate all the work you put in and your dedication. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Orin, did you want to kind of make your statement now, or do you want to hold off for Paul to share something else?
Let Paul share something else. That's okay.
Okay. Joe, you can probably guess what's coming now.
Hopefully not baby pictures.
No.
That was a great idea.
But it's not a surprise given the format here. But obviously, Joe, you've been a member of this board for a while, and I think we've all learned a lot from you. The date that Paul came up with was 2006, and you didn't dispute it when I sent it over to you the other day. That is a lot of decisions, a lot of thought, and a lot of time and effort put into helping support the town. So, thank you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for putting up with me. Not only this board, but past members.
Yeah. You all go first.
So let me start. I'm a newbie compared to you. I mean, in going through some of this documentation, going back in history, I was amazed to see how often your name showed up. and probably at every single board, in every single facility, in every single operation, going back to when I started looking at this project that goes back beyond 78. It's amazing how much time and effort you put into this town. And I think that there's nothing that this town can't do to acknowledge and appreciate the amount of time and expertise you brought. I mean, we bumped heads, but you know what? It was like, I used to walk into have a judge and he'd criticize me for something, but he'd give me the information and you know that he was coming from a good place. And so you really respect that kind of confrontation, and I appreciated it. And I realized it was always coming from the right place, and probably coming with more knowledge of the town than anyone on this board, and definitely myself included, could ever have brought to these decisions. And that's part of the process of this board, is understanding what goes into, what history is behind it. And I think it goes without saying how much you brought to this board itself. And I thank you for it.
Thank you.
All right, I'll use ladies next, since I'm the lone woman on the board at this point in time. Joe, I mean, you're simply irreplaceable. And like Orin said, you know, as an absolute newbie, the amount of just information and data and, you know, where the town has been, where they wanted to head, where we're headed now, I mean, it's all just been such a tremendous asset to have, and I really don't know what we're going to do without you, to be honest. You know, I'm sure you've served in every capacity on this board, you know, chair, you know, when I started and stayed on, and I think you've always put what has been best for the town, you know, in the forefront of your mind, and you know, it's just been a tremendous pleasure to work with you, and I hope that you are going to go and enjoy your family a little bit more often, hopefully, not sharing your time so much with us, but just like as you know, with Orin, I really do hope our paths cross again, because if anybody, I think, embodies what the town of Norton is, and that's you, Joe. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
So Joe, you didn't just simply, fill a seat. As you hopefully are aware, you bridged a huge gap when most of the board was new and we didn't have any experience, and you took one for the team and okay being the chair for a whole year, which I know you reluctantly did that because I don't think you like being the chair, or maybe not on this board, but you knew that you had the most experience, and in order to carry us through that whole year and let us learn from you as the chair, you did that. And not only then, but when the membership dropped dramatically, a couple of years later, you get up at the town meeting and appealed to everybody's sense of community and volunteerism, and got some of the members that are on the board right now there you go, Julie, to step up and be appointed to the planning board. So in a way, you basically have held up the structure of this board for the last several years, through many different ways. And hopefully, I think we might have a couple volunteers on the call right now that are running, a writing campaign, and hopefully that will continue. But Joe, at times when we were kind of dipping down, you helped pull us up, so thanks for that.
Yeah, and again, as the newest member, and my first interface with the board was quite intimidating, and it was really an eye-opener to see the way that you managed the board as chairman at the time that I first engaged with you, Joe, and I really respected that. And then to see kind of how you transitioned as a member of the board, it was a really immense learning experience for me of when I really need to listen and learn from a lot of you. I tend to be a quiet member, being the newest, but Joe, you shared a lot of insight in the way you shared your logic and the way you thought of different problems that we're up against. And I could see at times that you were trying to balance, the right thing for the town with kind of some of the passion that you had. And I really respect that. And I thought, as a leader, as the chairman, when you were there at the start of my engagement here, I really respected that. And, thanks for everything that you've done for the town of Norton and for all of us here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what I can add to any of that other than, I remember, we can go back on the tapes, and how many times did I say, let's defer to Joe and his experience in this, because how many times were we flying blind, Paul and I, going back a couple of years now. So your experience is unparalleled, and your opinion is very much appreciated. Unlike, Orrin and I, you and I agreed on quite a few things, but we also disagreed, and I think that's a good thing. I think you've done an amazing job, and I hope that you enjoy your free time now.
Yeah, and Joe, as you recall, when I started, there was nobody there, and in the department, and you really gave a lot of time, and especially this was my first planning job in Massachusetts is nothing like any place I've been to before. It took me a year to figure out what an A&R really is. It's not just a minor subdivision. Massachusetts has its own unique things, and you really gave me a great start, and I appreciate all the time. And like everyone else, I really hope you're enjoying whatever you're going to do, but just love what you're doing.
Well, let me just say that I appreciate the kind words, but I had some terrific examples. I've been in town all my life, and for better or worse, have served on a number of different boards, and each one of those boards had long-standing members that I learned from. If in any way I could impart any of that experience to you folks, I'm glad that was possible. But I guess I would challenge those of you who are still remaining. You have the opportunity to be the long-standing members going forward, and that's an asset that the town can use. So I hope that many, if not all of you, continue to serve either on the planning board or other boards. I think it's very important.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe and Orrin, for all you do on this planning board for 3 years, and your talent will be missed. And Joe, this is what you look like on the select board back in 1985, 86.
I worst of a baby pitch. At least as a baby, I was cute.
Very well done, Peter.
Very good.
Yep.
Okay. And other than voting Peter the MVP of the meeting for that, Oren, did you have anything else that you wanted to add for?
Yeah, just a short note. I've got to say that I've really enjoyed this experience and coming to town politics late, town business late. I want to encourage. I don't know who's still listening to this video, but I want to encourage people to get involved with the town. Involved with any kind of board meetings. I think it's really productive and it's really helpful. And the early, I like to see younger people getting involved. And as a start, if you're interested in town government or in politics, even if you can't get on the board, right now there's enough access to these meetings to listen in on them, to start jumping in and making comments. And I think it's a great experience, and I really enjoyed it as a learning growth experience for myself, and I encourage other people to do it. One other note, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, but I've always had the philosophy in dealing with this board of, you can't always get what you want, you get what you need. And I think going forward, that's the thing I would impart to the board in terms of, I know this town is really anxious to get funds and get things developed. And I see the Economic Development Committee, that's their job, getting people there and finding out what they want. I think at some point, it becomes the role, from my perspective, of a board to try and balance, the delta between what's needed and what's wanted at some point, and push these people a little bit. They may not be able to get anything, but push them for something. And I think it's particularly important in that they're looking at a charter proposal. I mean, I'm not for or against it. I don't know what you are, but if it should pass, you got to understand that your board will be the only one of 3 boards that still exist in the town that's an elected board. And basically, people, it's the only avenue for the public to hear and address their site-specific concerns and public participation in any kind of rezoning. And I think it's a role that you really got to take to heart, because it's going to be an important one. And I leave it to my fellow members. I think you're amply, fully able to fulfill that role, and I look forward to watching you guys on video. Thank you.
Thank you, Oren. Well, we will get those signed and over to both of you gentlemen at some point in the near future. Absent anything else, is there anything else anybody would like to discuss for the board? Or would Joe or Oren like to make a motion?
I'll defer to Oren. I want to agree with him.
Oren, you're muted.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that motion. A well thought out motion.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Folks.
Steve?
Yes.
Oren?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.